So, what makes you you? Seriously, think about it. Is it your body? Is it your memories? What if, over time, you could replace every single part of yourself, piece by piece? Would you still be the same person at the end of it all? Now, this might sound like something straight out of science fiction, but it's a question that has been bugging philosophers for thousands of years. And it all started with a famous thought experiment about a hero and his boat. Today, we're diving into the ship of Theseus, a puzzle that really truly challenges our basic understanding of what it means for anything or anyone to be the same over time. So, here's the game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to tackle the classic puzzle, just as it was first told. Then, we'll look at a really clever twist that makes it way harder. After that, we're going to turn the question on ourselves and ask if we're really any different from the ship. We'll even see how this ancient paradox pops up in, of all places, modern software development. And finally, we'll try to get to the bottom of what identity really even means. Okay, let's dive in. To really get a handle on this puzzle, we have to go all the way back to the original story. You know, the one that got philosophers arguing for centuries and basically set the stage for a debate that is still raging today. So this whole thing gets started with the ancient Greek historian Plutarch. He tells us that the people of Athens were super proud of the ship belonging to their hero, Theseus, and they wanted to preserve it as a memorial. But, it's a wooden ship. Over the years, the planks started to rot. So to keep it looking good, they take out a decayed plank and replace it with a brand new, identical piece of timber. And they just kept doing this, over and over, year after year. And this brings us to the first big, juicy question. The ship sitting in the harbor looks exactly the same, it's been in the same spot, and everyone's been calling it the ship of Theseus this whole time. But here's the kicker. Not a single original piece of wood is left. So, is it still the same ship? Your gut might immediately scream yes, or maybe no way. But hold that thought, because this puzzle is about to get a whole lot messier. Right. This is where it gets really interesting. A leader philosopher, a guy named Thomas Hobbes, he takes this pretty straightforward puzzle and adds a twist that turns it from a tricky question into a full-blown paradox. He just asks one simple thing. What happened to all those old planks?
And this is where things get really tricky. It's not just about replacement anymore. Now it's about reassembly. Imagine that every single time the Athenians pulled an old plank off the ship, they didn't just toss it. Instead, they carefully labeled it and stored it away in a giant warehouse. So let's walk through this step by step. A plank rots. They replace it with new timber. The original plank goes into storage. This happens again and again and again until the ship in the harbor is made of 100% brand new material. But now, over in the warehouse, you've got this complete, perfect set of all the original pieces. So you take those old planks and you build a ship with them, putting them back together in the exact same way they were on day one. And bam, right there, that's the heart of the problem. All of a sudden, you have two ships. The repaired ship, the one in the harbor, it has an unbroken history. It never stopped existing, and everyone has always called it the ship of Theseus. It has what philosophers call temporal continuity. But the reassembled ship has a super strong claim too, right? Maybe even stronger. It's made of the actual stuff of the original ship. It has material identity. So now what do? Which one is the real one? Is it the ship with the continuous story but none of the original parts? Or is it the ship with all of the original parts but a completely broken history? This is where the paradox really sinks its teeth in. They both have a legitimate claim, but they can't both be the one true ship. Or can they? And this is where the whole thing gets incredibly personal. Because this ancient puzzle about wood and nails, it isn't really about ships at all. It's a mirror. It forces us to ask some really deep questions about who we are. Are we any different from that ship, constantly being rebuilt, piece by piece? I mean, as one Reddit user put it so perfectly, our bodies are literally a biological ship of Theseus. Your cells are constantly dying and being replaced. The physical stuff that makes you right now is almost entirely different from the stuff that made you up 10 years ago. And yet, you don't feel like a different person. You're still you. So if our identity isn't locked into our physical parts, what on earth is it locked into? Okay, so this is where the philosopher John Locke steps in with a game-changing idea. He argued that to solve this, we have to make a really important distinction. He separates the idea of a man, that's the physical, biological animal, from the idea of a person. For Locke, a person isn't the body. A person is the consciousness. It's that self-aware thinking thing inside you that remembers its past and plans for its future. The body is just the vehicle. The person is the one driving.
And to really nail this down, Locke gives us another brilliant thought experiment, the prince and the cobbler. So picture a prince, all his royal memories, his personality, his sense of self. Now imagine you could magically lift that entire consciousness and transplant it into the body of a humble cobbler. Locke asks a simple question: where is the prince now? And most of us intuitively would say the prince is the person walking around in the cobbler's body because that's where his mind is. The person follows the consciousness, not the flesh and bone. Locke actually takes this idea even further. He says, look, if Socrates had one consciousness when he was awake and a totally separate, walled-off consciousness when he was asleep, then waking Socrates and sleeping Socrates would actually be two different people, even though they share the same body. For Locke, punishing waking Socrates for something sleeping Socrates did would be as wrong as punishing a twin for what their sibling did. It all comes down to that unbroken chain of awareness. So, here's the absolute key takeaway. Locke completely redefined personal identity. He just severed it from our physical bodies and even from the old-school idea of an unchanging soul. For Locke, you are you because you have a continuous stream of memory and self-awareness that connects you to your past self. This was an absolutely radical idea back then, and it has massive implications today. I mean, it's the philosophical foundation for all our questions about uploading our brains to computers, digital consciousness, advanced AI. If we could perfectly copy your consciousness into a machine, would that machine be you? According to Locke, yeah, it just might be. Now, if you're thinking this is all just abstract, philosophical navel-gazing, think again. This exact problem, this tension between continuity and material, between function and form, it plays out every single day in a really modern, practical field, software development. It's wild how perfectly this maps on a building software. Think about it. The old, decaying planks on the ship, that's like dead code. Clunky, outdated parts of a program that need to be ripped out. The new, stronger timber, that's when you refactor the code, replacing it with modern, more efficient stuff. The ship's whole purpose, its annual mission, that's the core business function of the app. And keeping the ship seaworthy is exactly the same as maintaining the application's stability so it doesn't crash on its users. See, for a software engineer, the philosophical debate is cool, but it takes a backseat to a very practical reality. The identity of the application matters a whole lot less than its function. If you replace every single line of code in an app over 5 years, but it still does its job for the company, then for all intents and purposes, it's the same application. A ship that can't float, no matter how original its wood is just a museum piece. An app that doesn't run is just a bunch of useless text files. So we've looked at this puzzle through ancient ships, through our own bodies, and even through computer code. After all that, what's the ultimate lesson here? What does the ship of Theseus actually teach us about the very idea of identity itself? Well, maybe the problem isn't with the ships. Maybe the problem is with the word identity. As Reddit user Fuseboy points out, maybe identity isn't some fundamental law of the universe. Maybe it's just a useful shortcut, a label we slap on things to help us make sense of a world that is always, always changing. It works 99% of the time, but a paradox like this, it shows you the cracks, the moments where our simple little label just can't handle a messy reality. Another user, Earthboom, takes it even a step further, and this idea is even more radical. Maybe things like ships don't have any identity on their own at all. The universe is just a swirling cloud of atoms. We're the ones who come along and draw an imaginary circle around a specific bunch of atoms and call it a ship. The identity isn't in the object, it's a meaning that we create with our words and our stories. Okay, buckle up, because this line of thinking leads to a really mind-bending philosophical view called mereological nihilism. This is the idea that, strictly speaking, objects made of other parts, like ships, chairs, planets, even our own bodies, they don't actually exist. The only things that are truly real are the most fundamental, indivisible particles. So from this viewpoint, the question, which is the real ship, has a very simple, if kind of unsatisfying answer: neither of them. The question itself is meaningless, because there never was a ship in the first place, only atoms arranged shipwise. The paradox just vanishes, because the very objects it's about were just an illusion. And this all leads us to a really powerful final thought that kind of ties everything together. The ship of Theseus doesn't have a single right answer because it's not a math problem. It's designed to show us the limits of our own concepts. The repaired ship tells a story about history. The reassembled ship tells a story about material. John Locke tells a story about consciousness. The software engineer tells a story about function. None of these is the true story. They're just different ways we choose to define what it means to be the same. This whole puzzle teaches us that maybe identity isn't a fact we discover out in the world, but a story we create. It's a story we tell ourselves to find some stability in a universe where, really, everything is always in motion.
Which leaves us with one final big question to chew on. If your identity, your entire sense of who you are, is ultimately just a story you're telling to connect the you of yesterday with the you of today and the you of tomorrow, who's writing that story? And more importantly, can you change the ending?